Hey, what's up everybody? All the gameplay in this video is super casual and very much unoptimized. As you can see, if you've seen any of my other recent videos, I'm currently not at home, so I don't have enough time to really spend the time and put the time into these builds as far as the gear is concerned. As far as the build and theory crafting is concerned, it's all here, so let's get into it. Shadow Clone Rogue is as thematic as it gets, with our main skill Barrage's mechanics utilizing the shadow aesthetic, but not actually being a shadow of itself. And that's one of two things that really sets it apart from the rapid fire skill specifically. So Barrage sprays out a barrage of 5 arrows normally, but you click it and then you're able to move almost directly afterwards before the barrage clone is done firing, which makes it a very agile and maneuverable skill, whereas rapid fire is more accurate, single target, and it doesn't have the bounce mechanic like Barrage does without its aspect, which is why I like Barrage so much. Also, rapid fire, you have to stand in place until the last arrow is fired, unless you want to use a dodge to move out of the way. So it's less maneuverable and generally, you know, more straightforward. So I really like Barrage because it's so chaotic and fun. The Barrage shadow animation doesn't count as shadow damage for the purposes of some other damage multipliers we'll be mentioning throughout this video, and this ties into our ultimate skill as well. Damage from our shadows counts as physical damage, and damage from the Shadow Clone ultimate does not scale with ultimate skill damage, only the shadow skill damage from Grasp of Shadow, and it counts as physical damage and can crit, and that's really it. It scales the rest off of copying our own damage, a portion of it at least, and this is really interesting because our beloved hemomancy vampiric power scales the way overpower used to scale, flatly off of a certain amount of our health, and can then be further scaled with physical damage and crit damage as long as we're using Sky Hunter to make our hemomancy procs automatically crit each enemy the first time it hits them. So scaling our Shadow Clone scales our hemomancy procs parallel to one another, making us hit every enemy on screen for an average of over 200k at this point in time with unoptimized gear, with just our vampiric power every 4 seconds, which is about how long it takes to go from pack to pack without utilizing any movement skills, not mentioning all the damage from literally everywhere else. You know, that's just one portion of the build, and it's already amazing. So, you know, the main purpose of this build is to have a bunch of shadow clones copying your barrage attacks, spraying the entire screen in an amazing flurry of arrows, and each of these arrows, if they hit a vulnerable enemy or if they crit, bounce to another target one time. So if you're point blanking one target, then every arrow that hits that first target is going to bounce to another target as long as it crits or hits a vulnerable enemy, which this late into the game, if you're using Sky Hunters and Precision, as well as a few other major notable like perks, passives, and then we'll be critting a hell of a lot. We manage over a 100% uptime on Shadow Clone through using Flicker Step Micro even on bosses, which is about 3 attacks and then a dodge, and then 3 attacks then dodge in a very fluid back and forth manner. It's really fun, honestly, as well as utilizing the preparation specialization to shave 5 seconds off of our ultimate cooldown every 100 energy we spend. I recommend getting a Tybalt Will, even a minimum roll like the kind that I have. It makes the build incredibly smooth to play. Since all the skills we'll be using on this build have cooldowns besides Barrage, the preparation specialization also resets everything, allowing us to use a wider range of useful skills in a very dynamic manner and in different combinations depending on the situation we find ourselves in, like a real ass ninja, and that makes it so much more satisfying. I don't know what to say about it. Once we make use of the Sky Hunter's passive alongside the Precision Key passive, we're able to sustain our resource almost indefinitely just by barraging at point blank range on a single target. However, I'm using a medium high roll, more like a medium roll, for the resource refunding effect, and I'm assuming if you're able to get a max roll on that Sky Hunter that you would never really run out of resource, even if you're not aiming well, even if you're not using Tybalts. So start farming Varshan as soon as you can on your Rogue. What's great about Rogue is that strength increases both armor and resource generation at the same time, making stacking resource generation easy peasy. If you get a high roll on both your rings and you're able to get like over 50% resource regeneration, our ultimate at this point gives us full full resource with just 1 point in the Aftermath passive rather than 3 while wearing Tybalt's Will, because 30 from the first point and then 50 from Tybalt's is 80 total, and then 50% of 80 is 120. So if we had a maximum resource of 120, we would be able to even get up there with just 1 passive point in the Aftermath node. In fact, I don't really think I need that 1 point in there, so I might switch it out for something else eventually. Even without using the Dark Shroud skill, we can still stack Dark Shrouds and make them incredibly strong with its 2 related aspects, and the perks behind the skill on the skill tree apply to these Dark Shrouds as well, giving us even more buffs in a super efficient manner. Consequently, this also makes us incredibly tanky, as well as the natural sustain that Rogue has from its Siphoning Strikes and its extra tankiness and its availability to armor. It all just goes crazy after you really have all the pieces together for the tankiness and sustain. We also utilize the combat glyph because it gives us even more resource refunding with which to spam Barrage with, and definitely avoid resource cost reduction, as preparation does not scale with that. So if Barrage costed 10 resource to use, let's say, it would take 10 casts to activate preparation's effect 1 time, which is why we're invested so heavily into resource refunding mechanics rather than resource cost reduction mechanics, so that we can cast Shadow Clone essentially whenever we want to cast it. This build does have an insanely high skill cap, I would say, for a Diablo 4 build, but I think it's worth it to play nonetheless because of how insanely agile and fun it is, while also having really good clear speed, surprisingly. The biggest weakness of the build is definitely going to be the suppression affix on elites and champion mobs in general. I've been using dash to slice through these mobs and then smoke grenading them while on top of them, and then start firing off huge swaths of barrages, and that usually takes care of them, but it's noticeably weaker against those situations particularly, as opposed to a lot of other builds people have been refining over time. This build is in its infancy, and I'll push it further once I'm back home, but for now, that's it. As you can see, the gear is not optimized, and I have no best in slot pieces, as well as missing 1 more level 15 glyph, and all the other glyphs other than that one are also level 15 and none are higher, as well as having a sort of low roll Sky Hunter and Grasp of Shadow, the most important uniques for the build, meaning its top end is amazingly high, and I'm excited to see how far I can push it once I have the time to. And if any of you have pushed it further or have like advice on how to shore up its weaknesses, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.